Mr. Norman. Ms. Leger Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you so very much for recognizing me, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here, Chairwoman. And I love it when there's two chairwomen, this Chairwoman and Ranking Member. But I do think that it is important that we stay rooted in fact. And the reality is there were no open borders during Biden. And in fact, Biden has deported more immigrants than Trump has, although he has done horrible things like deporting children who have brain cancer. They have deported citizens. They have acted in a manner that it is incredibly callous. But I wanted to give you some time, Ranking Member, to be able to answer some of the accusations that were made in a way that will allow you to do so without being interrupted. Ranking Member Velasquez.
Well, let me say that the law, the Small Business Act, requires and states clearly that an unlawful citizen person cannot access loans by the SBA, by the small business. That is clear. But here we have it. You know, the Republicans in the Financial Services Committee and in the Small Business Committee, they raised the issue of, you know, Democrats imposing requirements and all these regulations that are impacting and killing small businesses. But they are advocating for this in this bill. This bill shows the hypocrisy of the Republican majority. The majority opposed both the CSPB Section 1071 rule and the beneficial ownership requirements rule because it was onerous against small businesses. With Section 1071, that information was voluntary. And now, under this legislation, it's a requirement. They have to comply. So it's just unbelievable. No oversight, no information shared with us on sanctuary cities, how many of these offices will be closing down, what is going to be the cost to SBA. 40% of the workforce are going to be eliminated, fired off, and they are taking on more responsibility, like student loans. Since when that is the mission of SBA?
So, you know, I think that what we're finding today is what we find every time this Rules Committee meets and takes up legislation is time and again, Republicans are standing with the biggest corporations and the wealthiest Americans instead of with small businesses. And their actions continuously hurt mom and pop businesses. I need to tell you that when I go across my district, and I've gone and met with small businesses, and they are terrified of what? They never talk to me about immigrants as being the problem. The tariffs are the problem. Mm-hmm. I have met with every store I go into, whether it's I'm buying something for myself or I happen to be in one of our rural areas, our stores and our small mom and pop businesses are suffering because of the tariffs. And the Republicans have refused to even take them up. They don't have the courage to exercise their constitutional duty to take up the tariffs. And instead, they do things like this, which will cost SBA a lot of money in their, it's sort of vengeful. I mean, Trump is sort of, and Republicans allowing him to have a policy of vengeance. So they want to blame immigrants for all kinds of things. They want to blame immigrants for all kinds of things, and that's not the issue right now. The issue is what mom and pop businesses are doing. In fact, it's so bad that we had small businesses sue the Trump administration over those tariffs, and they won the initial case, the initial determination. And what those small businesses in that case said are the same things. There's uncertainty. There's chaos. We don't know whether Trump is going to be a taco again or not, right? Trump always chickens out. But when Trump is playing his game of chicken, all small businesses can't order their inventory. They don't know whether they should raise the prices. You know, it keeps hurting them. Do you want to respond to that issue of what the tariffs are doing to our small businesses?
Well, small businesses are hurting under this administration trade policies. And that is the issue. They rather come here and talk about sanctuary cities, but they don't want to discuss the real issue. The Wall Street Journal Small Business Index found 58% of small businesses say the economy has gotten worse, 42 points worse than in January. 66% of small businesses believe tariffs are having a negative impact. 51% anticipate a recession, and a staggering 59% list economic uncertainty as their top challenge. So, but rather than focus on this issue that matter most to small businesses, like tariff, this administration is focused on hollowing out the agency, closing regional offices, imposing onerous requirements to small businesses and to lenders, impacting access to credit for small businesses, and eliminating funding for 15 valuable counseling and training programs at a time when it matters most for small businesses.
Right, and we keep hearing false statements, like this whole idea that the bad billionaire bill they passed last time we were in this rules for 2 nights straight. What was it? What were we up? I mean, ranking, Madam Chair, and you were up with the rest of us, right? I mean, it was like 2 nights where we didn't sleep, and we worked nonstop. But we kept hearing things that were not accurate, like the idea that that bad billionaires bill is not going to raise the deficit when every analysis, every economist says it will raise the deficits, and we hear Republicans saying it's not going to raise the deficits, when we hear them trying to blame immigrants for Medicaid, saying 1.4 million, they do not receive Medicaid. Now, if certain states choose to provide that, that is up to the states, but they are not receiving federal Medicaid dollars, and Republicans keep repeating those lies. They keep repeating lies over and over again without proof. And that's what you're demanding, aren't you, Ranking Member Velasquez? That show us the evidence, not just the statements. And we are not seeing any of that, but we keep seeing them siding with big corporations, where people like Musk even says that bad billionaires' budget is a bad thing. Although he made a lot of money. Maybe billions of dollars more that he's made since he's been associated with Trump. You know, the Trump organizations have made billions of dollars from these tariffs, doing these tariffs, right? So let's start talking about what's really good for small businesses. And the problem isn't illegal immigrants, because they are not getting those loans. The problem is the tariffs and the economic policies of President Trump. And with that, is there, unless there's anything else you want to add, Ranking Member Velasquez?
We cannot continue to implement policies with total disregard to the ability of members of Congress to have the information provided by the administration. So the disregard for oversight and request for information, those are important issues for us to be able to do this in a responsible way.
And for that, it would serve both Republicans and Democrats to have good information coming from the administration. So that should be a bipartisan request and something we could work on together, don't you think, Madam Chair? And with that, I will yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Leger Fernandez. Mr. Griffith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just set the record straight. I'm not sure exactly what the gentlelady was saying when she said that we were saying things that weren't accurate. And I'm not telling you I know that it's accurate or inaccurate. All I know is that 1.4 million illegal aliens being on Medicaid, particularly Medicaid expansion, is a CBO, Congressional Budget Office number. I didn't make it up. The committee didn't make it up. That's a Congressional Budget Office. No, I'm not going to yield. I'm just saying the facts. It's a Congressional Budget Office number that was given to us as members of the Energy and Commerce Committee. That's where that came from. It's not something we made up. We didn't just pull that out of the air. It seems like today we're being accused of just pulling stuff out of the air. I don't know what the number is. Madam Chairman, I make no statement as to that I have personal knowledge of the illegal aliens who may or may not be on Medicaid expansion. But the Congressional Budget Office said that by specifically saying they couldn't get it, we were going to take 1.4 million illegal immigrants off the rolls. So you can't have it both ways, I would say, Madam Chair. The folks who want to say that we're taking these people off of Medicaid, particularly Medicaid expansion, can't be saying that at the same time as saying they're not there or that we're making that number up. That number came from the Congressional Budget Office. Now, people who listen to me over the years know that I don't put a lot of stock in Congressional Budget Office numbers, which is why I'm not personally endorsing the number. I'm just saying that's what they said. That's where the number came from. It's not something that Republicans made up. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm going to yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Mr. McGovern, you're
Well,
recognized.
first of all, let me thank both the witnesses for being here. I apologize that I was out of the committee room for a while. We had a leadership meeting. So let me just, having said that, let me just say I agree with every single word that Neva Velasquez just said. So I want to associate myself with her. But in terms of the CBO issue, I think I'll go back and I'll double check what they said about undocumented immigrants and healthcare. But if I'm not mistaken, they made a distinction between what is federally funded and what is state funded in terms of who is getting the healthcare. And there is a difference, especially when it comes to the stuff that we oversee. But I will be happy to get the details and pass them on to the gentleman. I yield to the gentlelady.
So, and I think that that is really important, that you can't take a number that is in a CBO score that is about 1.4 million that states may be providing in their decision, and then say that it is Medicaid and federally funded. And I will send you, Madam Chair, I request to enter into the record an article by factcheck.org stating a false claim about illegal immigration and Medicaid.
Without objection.
And in here, it actually very clearly says that a state program is by definition not Medicaid. And that's the difference, that when you refer to the fact that there are people, and each state may make that determination, but that is not Medicaid, that is not federal funds, because undocumented cannot utilize Medicaid. So we should stop using that number. Unless you want to say there are 1.4 million who might be using state programs. But that's not what we fund. What we fund is Medicaid. And so over and over again, we see these kinds of numbers being used by Republicans. And in fact, one Republican senator, when it was pointed out, when she was talking about these 1.4 million, when Senator Ernst did, when somebody said, well, if you kick all these people off of Medicaid and that people are going to die, because if you don't get health care, you can die. And her response was, we're all going to die. I mean, I would think that we would have more empathy in this room than to say, well, it doesn't matter because we're all going to die, let them die. That's how that is heard. It is heard as let them eat cake. It is heard as if though the people on Medicaid do not deserve to have health care, do not deserve to live. And I think that the people on Medicaid do deserve to live. They do deserve to have health care. They should not be brushed aside and say, but we're all going to die. And I think that that is a key difference on how we look at the moral values of these issues when we face them. And thank you very much. I yield back.
I thank the
to
gentlelady, and I again thank our two witnesses for being here, and I will yield back my time.
Thank you, Ms.